Welcome, Lajos. Thank you for being with us today. I would like to ask you to introduce yourself a little bit. Tell us about your professional background.
Yeah, there are different elements which direct me into the direction of environmental history. The first, and according to my opinion, my view, the most important was that I socialized a small village in eastern part of Hungary, in the Hungarian plain, in the traditional time. On the year of my birth, introduced the electricity supply to my village. Therefore, majority of my childhood unfolded and spent with traditional condition. And I remember during my childhood, it was a task of the traditional child in the small village checking the oldest relatives. And once I remember my mother sent to my grandmother's sister, and I walked to her, checking a physical and mental condition. It was a normal in the traditional village. And it was very surprising because she bore 10 children, and when arrived, she was very old, 80 or 90 years old, and read Anna Karenina from Tolstoy, and sit behind her. And we started to talk about literature partly, and partly about the history of my family. And very interesting because he was born in the Austro-Hungarian monarchy. And she had stories from the beginning of 19th century. Therefore, like a telescope, I was able to see 2 centuries. It was very impressive to me. This was the first impression. The second one, I socialized a peasant society. And in the peasant society, no high confidence for the politician, because my grandfather participated in the First World War, my father in the Second World War. Therefore, I would like to avoid any connection with the politician. In the Hungarian historiography, dominate by political topics. But I would like to specialize something basically different. Therefore, I socialized and I turned to the direction of historical geography, and later I realized it's not my research field is not a historical geography, much more environmental history. About environmental history, necessary to know this American-based direction of history is quite unique, because the history is founded in Europe, and each of other branches and the direction and field of history, it's founded in England, in France and Germany, except environmental history. Why? Because environmental history, it's somehow the history of transformation of the natural environment. In the case of United States, when arrived the first generation of conquistador at the beginning of modern time, it's no transformed. It's from the east coast to the west coast, it's a huge forest area. And the real transformation of natural environment started only in the 19th century. Therefore, the generation's memory find and saved the memory of history of transformation from wild to cultural landscape. And when I turned to the direction, it started the global ecological thinking, and I received fellowship to Switzerland, to Germany, to France, and opened the world for me.
It's an impressive area of studies. So you mentioned that environmental history comes from the United States. When did it emerge exactly?
It's mean that if we are looking at the history of disciplines, there are each generation one big question. For example, in the 19th century, the big question was how formed the national state. And later, how formed the global economy. Later, how formed the mass society. Later, how formed the mentality, generation by generation. And the last big question, there is a double and the dual nature of humankind. There is an animal and there is a bearer of culture. I am not sure you are animal, but in my case, I am sure. For example, I spent my childhood and young period in a student hostel. And I remember one story. I woke up in late night and no meals in the room. Therefore, no food in the room. Therefore, I went to the fridge in the student hostel. The validity of private property is quite a minimal. Opened a door of fridge, and I found only a small piece of butter, and ate this small piece of butter. I behave like a predator. Therefore, there is very important. There is a biological and a cultural nature of human. And environmental history look and try to describe human history as a double nature. Therefore, the basic unit of environmental history are ecosystem. And looking at history like how interact human society in the antiquity, in the Middle Ages, in the modern time, how interact with physical environment, and how transform, and the physical environment was able, therefore, a physical environment actor of history, not only a background of that, but actor which able, for example, look at a Second World War. In the Second World War, it's a series of very harsh winter. Look at the Battle of Stalingrad. It's a key factor was environment. And for example, in the Hungarian history, on the time of Mongolian invasion, Danube frozen over. Therefore, Mongolian troops was able to destroy whole of the Transdanubian area. Without harsh winter, no chance for that.
So you mentioned that environmental history, and therefore the history of humanity, depends a lot on specific conditions about weather and eras. What other functions predict this environmental history? What other major functions are there?
Yeah, but generally, if we are looking at a history of memory of community. Its community may be a small village, maybe one city. There is a urban history, for example, whole of the nation and whole of the humankind. And the most important advantage of history are a cultural evolution, because there are double side of evolution. There is a biological evolution and a cultural evolution. A cultural evolution very important because generation by generation is not necessary to learn from the start position everything. We are able to passing information for that. And if we are looking at history, for example, because the series of lecture which I take one piece of the lecture focuses to the epidemics. How we can use the knowledges of environmental history for solving the problem of epidemics in the different phases of the history and the experiences concerning and collected in former epidemics. We can imagine an ecosystem like a huge pyramid. On the top of the pyramid, locate a humankind. But the nature of pyramid, the biological pyramid, founded to microorganisms. For example, virus, bacteria, and fungi. And when the top area, the basis of the pyramid, there is some moving, unbalanced situation, this flow reach and transform the physical background of society. And for example, epidemics and the natural disaster became dangerous and became able to form the direction of evolution of human society on the crisis period. For example, in the 14th century, this was the Great Plague area. A bacteria transformed not only in Europe, but in China, the physical condition of the human evolution. And for example, the starting position and the starting date of modern society started after the crisis, because the crisis not only disaster, but there's a challenge. And very important, which kind of answer we are able to take for the challenge. European society formed a very important innovation, introduced the absolute state. Introduced the regional fair system, introduced regional currencies. Therefore, the communication and the direction, the logistical background of European society started so quick and important evolution, which formed the global dominance, the global world system, started in the crisis of 14th century. And for example, if we are looking at modern epidemic situation, a little bit same situation. I worked in different research center in Europe, for example, in Munich, in Bern, in Paris, and in Brno, in Czech Republic. And one of the most important was in Munich. I worked together with one politician. I tried to avoid the connection with getting connection with the politician, but sometimes it's very useful because the political, the politician and the political life. This is the art of decision, of decision. Some situation because the politician necessary to balance and take into consideration a lot of aspects. And I worked together with one minister of environmental protection of Peru, it's South America. And she told to me each critical situation is not a problem, it's a challenge. It's a challenge. Therefore, if we are looking the recent epidemic situation, we can see as a challenge for us. And very important, one of my best friends is Ernő Duda. It's a biologist and specialized to the virus research of the different virus. And he told to me that the critical element of the epidemic was increase of communication, efficiency of communication, and the number of communication. Because at the beginning of 21st century, if, for example, take the communication rate 1 unit, to the 2 decades later, it's increased to 40. Therefore, efficiency of communication increased so high that probability of infection, which started in China or Asia, arrived to United States or Europe, increased so high, therefore was very high the proportion of starting a global infection, which verified the COVID-19. But this is a challenge, to my mind.
So you mentioned that people have an increased amount of role in how the environment is going to develop in the future. Can you make predictions, valid predictions for the future in regards of pandemics, in regards of historical events that might take place?
Yeah, but it's a very dangerous question because history and looking back. And very interesting, a lot of my professors who participate in the political life, it's fade. Because the perspective of politician and the perspective of historian, it's not the same. But if we are using a result of environmental history, we can define the frame of the future. If we are looking the future, according to former experiences, we can divide 2 strategies. The first strategy is a shark strategy. This is living in the global ocean, and very interesting. The shark appeared almost 4 million years ago, on the time when evolution didn't invent the bone. It's cartilage. The body of a shark forms a cartilage. A very efficient, very simple, but very efficient predator. Recently, the developed country behaved like an efficient, very primitive but efficient predator. We are living in artificial environment. The place of this interview are artificial environment, air condition. Therefore, as small buildings, we are able to transform to comfortable for human, but very dangerous because this shark strategy based on 2 pillars, cheap energy and the cheap water. If we can finance and organize and form the logistical background of cheap energy and cheap water, it will function. But there is other strategy. It's a rat strategy. You know, the rat is a rodent. We are able to live everywhere on the world. The rat strategy, which followed before the Industrial Revolution, each of the human whole of the world, it's very efficient because the basic element of the rat strategy are adaptation. A continuous adaptation, ate everything, like me in the butter, with the butter, and use each resources. Very efficient, high efficiency. Therefore, recently the developed country followed the shark strategy. We are not able to forecast how long we are able to finance a shark strategy, and very expensive, and the rat strategy, 2/3 of humankind. But to my mind, epidemics indicator of the crisis. COVID-19 was a very important alarm for whole of the human society, but with the sentence and with the words of my politician friend, it's not a problem, this is a challenge. And we necessary to find the answer for this challenge.
Thank you so much for your answers, and thank you so much for sharing your insights about environmental history. It was truly enlightening.
Thanks a lot, I enjoyed.
Thank you.